I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. Founder of the feast, indeed, said Mrs. Cratchit, reddening. Wish I had him here. I give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it. My dear, the children, Christmas Day. It should be Christmas Day, I am sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. Well, you know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow. My dear, Christmas Day. I'll drink his health for your sake in the days, not for his. A long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt. The children drank the toast after her, but it was the first of their proceedings which had no heartiness in it. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but he didn't care tuppence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. But as they faded, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. Now, it was a great surprise to Scrooge, as this scene vanished, to hear a hearty laugh. It was an even greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as that of his nephew, and to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room with a spirit standing smiling by his side, looking at that same nephew. Now, it is a fair, even-handed, noble adjustment of things that while there is infection in disease and sorrow, there is nothing in the world more irresistibly contagious than laughter and good humor. When Scrooge's nephew laughed, Scrooge's niece by marriage laughed as heartily as he, and their assembled friends, being not a bit behindhand, roared out lustily. He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live. He believed it, too. More shame for him, Fred, said Scrooge's niece indignantly. Scrooge looked at his nephew's wife as if for the first time. She was very pretty. Exceedingly pretty. With a dimpled, surprised-looking, capital face. A ripe little mouth that seemed made to be kissed, as no doubt it was. And the sunniest pair of eyes you ever saw in any little creature's head. Well, he's a comical old fellow, that's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offenses carry their own punishment, and I won't say a word against him. Well, who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He don't lose much of a dinner. Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner, said his wife. And they all agreed, and they must be allowed to have been competent judges, for they had just had dinner, and with dessert upon the table were clustered round the fire by lamplight. Well, I'm very glad to hear it, for I haven't any great faith in these young housekeepers. What do you say, Topper? Now, Topper had clearly got his eye upon one of Scrooge's niece's sisters, for he answered that a bachelor was a wretched outcast who had no right to express an opinion on the subject. Scrooge's niece's sister, the plump one with the lace tucker, not the one with the roses, blushed. After tea they had some music, for they were a musical family and knew what they were about when they sung a glee or catch, I can assure you. Especially Topper, who could growl away in the bass like a good one and never swell the large veins in his forehead. Scrooge's niece played well upon the harp, and played, among other tunes, a simple little air that Scrooge suddenly remembered as being a favorite of his frail little sisters. But they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while, they played at blind man's buff, for it is good to be children sometimes. And I no more believe Topper was really blind than I believe he had eyes in his boots. For the way in which he went after that plump sister in the lace tucker was an outrage on the credulity of human nature. Bumping against the piano, knocking against the chairs, tumbling over the fire irons, wherever she went, there went he. He wouldn't catch anybody else. If you had stumbled up against him, as some of them did, and stood there, he would have made an attempt at endeavoring to seize you, which would have been an insult to your understanding, and would instantly have sidled off in the direction of the plump sister. She often cried out that it wasn't fair. And really it was not. And no doubt she told him her opinion of it when another blind man being in office. They were so very confidential together behind the curtains. Next they played how, when, and where. And Scrooge, forgetting himself, called out his own answers, not that anyone could hear him, and laughed with glee whether he was right or wrong. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and beamed upon him with such favor that Scrooge begged, like a boy, to be allowed to stay until the guests departed. This the spirit said could not be done. Oh, here's a new game. Oh, one more half-hour, spirit, only one. It was a game called Yes and No, in which Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what. He only answering to their questions yes or no, as the case may be. The brisk fire of questioning to which he was exposed elicited from him that he was thinking of an animal, a live animal, rather a disagreeable animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talked sometimes, and lived in London, and walked about the streets, and wasn't led by anybody, and was never killed in a market, and was never put on display in a menagerie, and was not a horse, or an ass, or a cow, or a bull, or a tiger, or a dog, or a cat, or a pig, or a bear. And every fresh question that was put to him, this nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter, and was so inexpressibly tickled he was obliged to get up off the sofa and stamp. At last the plump sister, falling into a similar state, cried out, I found it out! I know what it is, Fred! I know what it is! What is it? It's your Uncle Scrooge! Which it certainly was. Admiration was the universal sentiment, although some objected that the reply to, is it a bear, ought to have been yes. He has given